This is the London Fintech Podcast, brought to you by your host, Mike Ballerman, bridging the worlds of suits and t-shirts, of finance and technology, bringing you insights, stories, and inspiration from the golden age of opportunity and innovation happening in London right now.
Hi, this is Mike Ballerman, and this is London Fintech Podcast, episode 187, brought to you in association with Smart Pension and the unlistedboard.com. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Hristo Borisov, CEO and co-founder of Payhawk, to talk about a topic that amazingly we haven't yet covered, the vital topic of customer service and support in FS/Fintech. In retail FS, or even FS as a whole, customer support is of course essential. However, we all have horror stories of dire experience, whether it's ye olde, we're experiencing abnormal call volumes at present, which is always ever present on some banks' call lines, while you slowly age more and more being held in a queue. Or B, online, like my recent attempt to check out my ISAs only to keep getting error messages. And then when I called the phone number on the help number, the automated system cut me off. Rather distressing, and I literally started Googling news on this company to see whether they'd gone bust, been hacked, I'd lost all my funds. And of course, in Fintech, where, as I may have moaned about some time ago, due to me having done precisely what I was told to do in their quotes, help, unquotes, chat, having raised reservations that this might go badly wrong, it turned out I was locked out of my Revolut card for weeks with no way back other than, fortunately, given my profile, to embarrass them on Twitter. Payhawk, in their day job, combine credit cards, payments, expenses, and cash into one integrated experience. So there's a lot of moving parts there, even if there's no errors on their part and the users just get it wrong. They will need help. Payhawk must be a thing, capital A, capital T, as they recently raised an impressive $20 million in their Series A. Goodness knows what they'll raise in their Series J and K. And they must be very keen on this experience thing, as when I asked Hristo to come up with something more exciting than talking about payments or banking or something that we've flogged to death in the last better part of a decade now, he suggested customer service as his first off-piste thought. So, simple question. Is it possible, whether you're in FS or in Fintech, to do customer service really well whilst not going bankrupt, having employed thousands of PhDs in customer service at megabucks? And back to an old favourite of FS versus tech. Why do we even need customer service if the tech, quotes, works, unquotes? Plenty to talk about, so let's get on with the show. Good morning, Hristo. Thank you for joining me on the show today.
Hey, Mike. Thank you for having me on the show.
So we were talking about, me being British, of course, the weather. You guys are headquartered in London, but you're not currently in London, where it's been another dire month in August, probably had more sort of rain than when Noah was around with his ark. And you're in a rather more sensible country for weather. You're actually in Sofia in Bulgaria, where you were telling me it's a little warm at present, a little warmer than it is in London, where it's about 21 today.
Yeah, for the past 2 weeks we have had about between 36 and 38 degrees constantly, and that has been a little bit tough.
Yes, that's quite warm. So I assume that you guys have air conditioning over there, otherwise you would die trying to sleep at 38 degrees from lack of sleep.
Yeah, it gets about 22, 23 degrees during the night, but this is still unbearable without proper air conditioning here.
Yes, and I listened to one of the podcasts I listened to this year a few times is one by someone called Alex Kashuta, the Subversive podcast, although it's not very subversive. Actually, most of her views would have been considered completely normal on everything in the 1970s, shall we say. And she's in Romania on the Hungarian border and lived in London for 5 years. And someone said to her in one of the podcasts, asked her a question, said, what do you miss about London? And amazingly, and I think Bridget and I were listening in the car and I almost crashed into a tree. She said, I miss the weather, because the one reason we're going to emigrate one day when we escape the sort of the rat race is somewhere with better weather. And she said she misses the weather over here because actually you do get sort of a mild spring, whereas in the depths of Romania and I suspect in the depths of Bulgaria, you have freezing cold winters and then sort of 2 days later it's a boiling hot summer with no transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Spring and autumn are something of the past. We go from, minus 20 to quickly jumping into 15, 20 degrees. So you can really we have to adjust fast. So we were getting in June that this year there is no discount for winter clothes because you can still wear them in June. And then it went from being like 12, 15 degrees to being, 38. But yeah, we're now enjoying the good part of the summer.
Well, it's an interesting question, actually. Which major European capital, just for the sake of argument, let's treat Russia as European. I know it goes quite a long way east. Has the widest temperature range. I mean, I've visited Moscow a number of times, and they easily do below -30 to above +30 in the summer, which is a good 60 degrees range, which is phenomenal. I mean, here we struggle to do a 25-degree range. Is Sofia similar, like about 60 degrees range?
I wouldn't say 60, but we can definitely have about 45, 50. And I hope this kind of difference explains the condition of our roads here.
Yes, a buddy of mine went to Bulgaria recently and said they weren't entirely ideal. But successful founders like you will have to stop yourselves buying Ferraris and Aston Martins when you eventually cash out. And actually, it raises a question, a very interesting question, thinking of maps. There's a map I've never ever seen. I'll be really fascinated. If any listener knows and sees it online, do send me an email. Where the front is on Europe, if you drew a line as to where it's the practice to have air conditioning. So, for example, Czechoslovakia, I know, doesn't have air conditioning. They just leave the window open, and it can get hot in the summer there. But I wonder where the line is, where you would draw a line where on one side they tend not to have it and the other side they tend to have it? Or do you think it's a kind of country thing, which is like in Romania they don't have it and in Bulgaria they do?
I would definitely say it's a country thing. I think it's part of the culture. I mean, we have cases where here you're planning the apartment and the air conditioning is the most important thing you plan. While in other areas, outside of Bulgaria, I have seen that they're really not that regarded highly. And also there is a lot of people saying, air conditioning can be bad because of allergies and things like that. So it really depends on the country.
Yes, and funnily enough, I mean, you know London well. One knows that actually, it occurs to me that these days, every office in London is air conditioned. And even I think when I started my career in the city in 85, everything was air conditioned then. So actually we've had air conditioning for quite a long time. Why we've had it, I don't know. Probably to stop people leaping out of office windows and they get bad customer service in NFS.
Well, I think if you have been in the US, you have seen that regardless of the state, it's actually 10 degrees wherever you log in into a hotel or a restaurant. I always bring an extra jacket there.
Yeah, well, I mean, the worst place is Singapore, being about 2 degrees off the equator. It's absolutely bloody freezing there. You don't go to dinner, for example, in a Singaporean restaurant without sort of, a fleece, a jumper and sort of a ski jacket, just in case they're sort of being really aggressive. So in terms of your day job, I assume you weren't always payhawking. So how do you get from being a lad to a CEO? You can miss out most of the bits from about the age of 3 or 4. You can just sort of fast forward that bit a bit.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to share because as we're talking about customer and putting the customer success front and center in the organization, that really goes back to my first company that I started working called Telerik. The slogan of the company was called Deliver More Than Expected. And the number one important thing that we had to do as a company is that we really had to provide extremely good customer success. We were starting developers there. So I started as a developer/engineer, beginning of my career. Spent 3 years as being a developer. And then as the company was growing, we realized that, we need to have somebody thinking about incubating products, thinking about a little bit more of the strategy around the products. And this is where we come up with the concept of product managers. And I was one of the first experiments of being a product manager in the company. And then quickly over the years started driving our cloud and mobile products into the company. Into 2016, I was already reporting directly to the founders of Telerik after we got acquired for $265 million by a public US company called Progress Software, and managing the strategy and the goals of an organization that was 180 people, 12 product managers, 170 engineers. And then after spending total of 11 years at that company, really the pace after we got acquired was very different, and I decided that I want to really go back to this kind of startup culture, building things from ground up, and going and conquering certain industries. And this is how I decided to quit my day job 2018 and get into the building Payhawk.
And what was it? I'm always curious about this. What was it that led you to whatever, I don't know, wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go, I know what I'm going to do tomorrow. I'm going to quit my day job and found Payhawk. What was the inspiration for that?
Well, I got my first daughter being born. And I said, if I don't live my comfortable life right now, I would never go and risk it, because I knew that from the day she was born, it's going to get tougher and tougher. And I said that needs to be the trigger. If I don't do it now, every day that I wait is going to, be much harder for me to start. And that was an interesting conversation with my wife. We just had our first baby. And I said, you know what, I'm going to work for free.
I've given up financial security. I'll
Yes.
take a huge risk. And mothers of young children are very known to say, yeah, that's a great idea. I just fancy some financial insecurity when I'm stuck with a baby.
Yeah, so this was it. And also that was obviously a combination of me getting to a point where I realized I cannot achieve, the dreams I have within the current environment in which I was.
We'll come back to Payhawk a little bit later, but briefly, what was it, you having decided to leave and do your own thing, that led you to dive into this sort of the mixture that I mentioned before of these various aspects of credit cards, payments, expenses, cash in one place? Did you have some personal experience of pain, or did you sort of flick through blogs online to find out what gave people headaches and you thought, oh, that's a headache I'll solve?
Our goal was simple. So together with one of our brightest engineers at Telerik, we said, let's start a company. And the idea was to create a big company. And to create a big company, you only need to do two things. You need to solve a big problem in a big market. And if you do this correctly, you can achieve that. And this is where we started looking at the problem, and we had a different hypothesis. We had a much more specific problem that we wanted to solve. But as we started talking to financial people and owners of businesses, across continents, we realized that this is just a tiny problem. We need to zoom out. And this is where we ended up building what we call the financial system of tomorrow. So we actually were looking for a problem to solve, and coming from a company that was building enterprise software, we knew that building just software is not exciting anymore. The next market categories are going to be based on the crossroads of different things. So for example, just building software is not enough. You need to cross this with, let's say, financial services or healthcare or biotech or something else. And this is where the next set of categories are going to emerge. And we believe that financial services is one that has plenty of opportunities, especially when it comes to B2B payments and managing company spend in a much more unified way. And this is the challenge we are currently solving.
Yes, you remind me of Arthur Koestler in The Act of Creation, who said a lot of creation. He didn't use the word innovation, I don't think it really existed in that sense then. He's putting together two things which have never been put together before, and as you say, the stage where we've got to now.
Well, I just can give you an example. We just recently got as a customer a company called Melita in Germany, and that's the company that invented the coffee filter. And I'm not sure whether you know the story, but that was invented in 150 years ago by a lady. I don't know whether you know, but coffee at the beginning was boiled like tea. You were just boiling the coffee beans, and then you were trying to remove the coffee beans and drink whatever was left.
A coffee percolator. My mum had one. She would put it on the gas stove. The coffee would be there, and it would literally percolate up, which I guess is kind of like a baby version of proper espresso machines. They do the same thing, although they've ground the beans, but
Yeah, and at some point, a lady, her puppy was going to painting classes, and she decided to use some of the tissue to filter the coffee to make it much better so that she doesn't chew the beans. And at some point, she realized that that's the coffee filter, and this is how Melita was born as a company, and they just became a customer. 100 years old company, currently on the digital transformation innovation space and getting into that. So definitely combining something existing in a unique way is an ability to create a lot of innovation.
Yes, I mean, a little bit further in your direction in Turkey, having drank Turkish coffee in the days when normal people were allowed to travel around the world and not just sort of VIPs and politicians in private jets. The Turks still go for this sort of idea of filtering the coffee through your teeth because it can be quite strong with quite a lot of bits in. That's a good, cool story. So, as I mentioned, the service in FS as a whole, I don't know whether it's just me being unlucky, but it can be bloody rubbish. So, whether it's telephone banking, being kept for ages, whether it's online stuff and the bloody website doesn't work and you start wondering whether it's been hacked and all your money's gone, or whether it's some new hot and sexy fintech app what can possibly go wrong, and it does. Do you think my experience is just unlucky, is it, or I'm just incompetent or something in terms of choosing things, or do you think that actually the reality behind all the hype is that actually financial services as a whole doesn't do customer service that well compared to other industries?
Well, I think just the problem here is that for a lot of those companies, they imagine the customer, support to be a cost center, right? They don't see this as a revenue generating function, while we as a company, we do see this as a revenue generating function. And this is just a different way to approach it. And when we were starting building, the company, new banking was already 2018, it was already out. We already had most of the new banks that are currently dominating Europe already there. And one of the consistent experience we have been seeing and experiencing also as consumers were that they were saying we have the best customer experience, user experience, everything is very slick into the mobile app, but they were forgetting that, customer support and being able to get to a human being is part of your experience if you are not able to solve your problem. And we decided very early on that this needs to be one of the pillars when we were building the company. We said, we really need to make sure that when it comes to payments, whatever we do with the software part and the financial services part, the customer success and the customer support part needs to be on par with everything else. Otherwise, especially us coming with, Bulgarian names in a market which is dealing with money, we had to make sure that we are really excelling on that front. And we decided to go with, to put this as part of our culture, and we made that front and center as our priorities, so that every employee at Payhawk knows that he has two titles. First of all, he's customer success, and then he's something else. And that is kind of the mentality we embodied here. And I think that a lot of those kind of new banks, they were saying, well, we are a lot more efficient, we are digital, the customer experience is amazing. And for example, we are employing 5 times less employees in the customer success department than, let's say, a regular bank does with the amount of customers they have. But they were forgetting that still, if you go to the forums or if you go outside, this is kind of the number one problem of all those consumers using that. And especially as we were planning our strategy around businesses only, Payhawk is only servicing businesses, we knew that this is even more important because sometimes it might be okay if nobody replies to you, if you're a consumer, 1 out of 10 million, and you're trying to do something on the app. But if you're a business and you're paying your employees or you're paying your bills or you're managing a company card of an employee that's overseas, that's being stuck there, paying for an airplane, you really want to make sure this is being resolved within minutes rather than days. And that's actually still a main reason why we are moving a lot of companies that were, trying to use some of these new banking services, moving to a proper solution like Payhawk.
Yes, so there's quite a lot in there to unpack. I mean, just picking the last bit first, I think it's clearly the case that B2B standards of client service, as tends to be thought about, are much higher because you've got professionals on both ends and the market is quite efficient, and perhaps it is the B2C companies that are the problem because, as you say, you might be one, I don't know how many customers the likes of a Citigroup or HSBC has. Sake of argument, let's say 100 million, let's pick up a random number. If you're 1 in 100 million, you ain't got much pull with the person that's servicing you. Whereas even successful B2Bs can be very successful with a few hundred clients. I mean, I don't think the fixed income at Kleinworts had 100 clients. We had the better part of 100 clients. And, that kept a very nice business going for decades and decades or even centuries, actually. So there's an asymmetry of power thing. But starting at the beginning, because you made an interesting statement, and the reality is that lots of listeners will be at firms where the mentality is of regarding customer service / support as a cost. I totally get the fact that you guys chose a few pillars at the beginning and said, okay, what we're going to do is this, and this, and these are our main ones, and that the way to be good at anything is design it inside out. So for sake of argument, if I dedicated my life to being fit and everything else came second, I would be fitter. There's a challenge, of course, in that you can't be good at everything. So for people working at firms where customer service is a cost, how would you suggest to them, if you were kind of counselling them or mentoring them, how would you suggest they change their attitude? What is it that can change the attitude from, this is just a cost, having to employ all these people over there, into that this is something that actually can be profitable for us?
Well, I think they should definitely look at the side of, how can we actually increase the quality of the service by even charging more? because there are a lot of people that would be willing to pay more. Or if, for example, I would say a lot of financial planning is done by saying, okay, we're going to run this product, it's going to be extremely cheap, free of charge, and then customers are going to be expecting that we have done our math, that we also have customer success properly serving this, right? And a lot of those companies that are doing, let's say, a freemium model or giving you something extremely cheap or even free of charge, they come with the mindset of this being actually having no support behind it. You're going to figure it out because at the end of the day, you're not paying me anything. But I would say that a lot of customers would be willing to pay and get that support because they're going to get into that situation. So I think there is an opportunity for those companies to actually charge premium and to be able to, put customer success to a, on par quality, because most of the time they're just not calculating this as part of the revenue generation function. And I think if you turn things around and you say, okay, but if I have proper customer success, maybe this is going to increase my, average deal size. Maybe it's going to increase the lifetime value of the customer. I'm going to have fewer customers. That's going to be for sure, the supply and demand curve. But you're going to be able to serve those customers much better. And on our side, that's why we are not focused on vanity metrics like number of users or number of companies. We're focused on, bottom line and top line, making sure that we are generating enough revenue and we're making enough money. And at the same time, our satisfaction rates and health scores are through the roof.
Very interesting, because hearing you talk there, just zooming out, you sound like, quotes, a normal businessman making a normal business decision that in other sectors people wouldn't think twice about. So for the sake of argument, let's say that as a side project in your spare time, if you have any, which I doubt, you decide to open a restaurant in Sofia. Somebody in the restaurant business knows that either you go for cheap and cheerful or super high-end or something in the middle, and that the cost of that service, and it is a service, the food may not actually differ that much sometimes, the cost of having a nice restaurant and tables on it and spaced out and air conditioning and all these things cost, and therefore you have to incorporate in the price. So from one very simple perspective, going back to the way of trying to persuade other people to think of this differently, from one perspective it's a kind of obvious, it's an obvious business decision. So then the question kind of arises is, why do they do it sort of poorly in FS? Well, one of the examples I gave in FS of calling your banker on the telephone if there's some problem is because current accounts are free over here, so they can't make any profit out of it if they're accounting for it in this narrow way. Another problem that affects quite a few techs and fintechs, of course, which is this whole kind of super tech attitude of lean startup. Oh, do something crappy, but as long as it's good enough, just set sail, get in your little boat. But actually, as has been clear by those people who tried that, but also anybody who knows FS, you can't do that because FS is super regulated. Firstly, you've got to get the regulations. You've got to have your relevant licenses. The second thing is that finance is the second most important thing in people's lives fundamentally, perhaps after health. You don't want to be in hospital, but then after that, you don't want all your money to have disappeared. I mean, in extremis, your girlfriend or your job and stuff, they can change and life goes on. But if you lose all your money, that takes some recovering from. So I think it's this sort of overly tech attitude. And then the third thing, just coming back to the business stuff, which is that going back to the app banks, a number of those started off, and of course in the UK, where current accounts aren't charged. So they've got to build all this stuff, and then it is an expense because there's no profit. Having said that, I think for the ones that are more coming from a sort of tech fintech than a fintech, the company I would point to, who I use all the time these days actually, perhaps sadly I should try and support more businesses, but anyway, is Amazon. And one thing I think that's propelled Amazon to its phenomenal success is that Bridget and I have never, in a decade, had a problem with anything on Amazon. If something goes wrong, you say, this insert word, X, Y or Z turned up, it's rubbish, it doesn't work, they sort it out, no problem. So I think one of the great things at Amazon, which is a purely tech company, you don't see any buildings, where you can walk into a shop with Amazon on it, is because they appreciate that even if you're a purely digital thing, okay, they've got a logistics chain behind it, okay, we understand that, but what presents to you on your app or on the interweb is just sort of digitally stuff, that even for a techie like that, customer service is super vital.
And you are actually making a great point because, Amazon can be it is running half of the cloud infrastructure in the world. So we can regard this as one of the most powerful tech companies out there. And they still have people replying, right? They still don't rely on this being, you are going to sort it out with some guides or a chatbot or something else. At the end of the day, if you have a problem with your window, you can raise a ticket and you can talk to a real person quickly, right? And I think that's quite important. They realize that it cannot be just one-sided being saying, well, we are going to solve everything with tech and we're going to automate everything, even though we are, we are building the most cutting-edge product out here. And I think that's the answer. You need to have both the technical capabilities and the human power. And I think another thing that we haven't seen from a lot of companies that, they are actually not putting a lot of empowerment behind those customer success people. So you might be able to reach to somebody, but it might take longer for this person to do the job. And if as it takes longer to serve the customer, it means that there is another one waiting to be served. And that's why, in our case, empowerment was extremely important. So one of the first things we did at the company is we created a channel called War, right? A Slack channel. And the Slack channel is called War because, once something is posted in it, this should be the most important thing we need to resolve right now. And the War channel is where the customer success folks or anybody in the company interacting with the customer can post an issue or a problem that has been reported if he's not able to solve this himself. Right. And then we have rotating what we call firefighters, which are engineers on a rotating basis that are responsible for putting out the fires into the war channel. Right. So they have to be immediately assigned to the problem. And we have usually within 2 minutes an engineer solving a problem if the customer success person is not being able to do so. And that is extremely important to be able to actually have the backup of those customer success people to be able to rely on proper engineering that is going to be able to solve the problem if they are not being able to do quickly.
So that's an example of what you were talking about earlier, which is that if you design a company from the inside out, it is possible to design anything in. We saw a great program on Amazon Prime, a great documentary on Amazon Prime, which I really recommend to anybody who's got Amazon Prime talking about Amazon. This is like an Amazon advert, I should sort of charge them. Called The Last Man on the Moon, which was about the commander of Apollo 17, who was literally being the last man on the moon in whatever it was, 68 or 69. Of course, all of us around in 68, 69 thought that by the end of the century we'd be on Pluto, let alone Mars, and that didn't happen. And it's really interesting because it not just goes through the Saturn V, the whole project and the whole sort of the rocketry stuff, which is a phenomenal project with phenomenal progress made. But also he just talks about his sort of human life, and his divorce and the stress of being a sort of hotshot pilot, and then also the in a sense the anticlimax. If you are on the moon, how's the rest of your life? It's like I've mentioned before many times. We watch MotoGP, and all MotoGP riders say that when you retire, nothing in your life will ever be the same again. Because there's nothing like going at 220 miles an hour on two wheels into a right-angled turn in the wet. You can never get that kind of adrenaline. Anyway, the point being, going back to the sort of Saturn V and also the MotoGP, is if you give the engineers, and I mean the engineers of the company, the founders and CEOs, as well as just the devs and people like that, the task of designing it from the beginning, we're going to design this to go to the moon. You will get to the moon. It may be quite hard. It may be harder than you imagine, but you will get there with enough resources and effort. So I like this sort of centric idea about starting with it at the centre. And there's a book on my desk which I must read sometime called The Fish Rots from the Head Down, which is about boards and when boards go wrong and stuff like that. And basically, I think I can summarise it as saying, fire the chairman, or once you've fired the chairman, then fire the CEO or something. Of course, it's a Chinese phrase, which is applied to various of their sort of empires when they've come and gone over there. I was trying to think when you were talking, but I couldn't actually think of the opposite metaphor, which is the fish is created from the head down or something like that. So going back to advice to listeners and that, it can be quite hard if you're in a firm where they aren't customer service centric to create that from the bottom up. You do need to get the management to drive it from the top down.
Absolutely.
Because you can say lots of nice words, but for the sake of argument, if people don't get promoted or they don't get pay rises or bonuses or whatever it is happens for a certain behaviour, then over time that behaviour will not flourish in the company.
Absolutely. I think that's the reason why, you're asking me if I need to advise a company how to do it. This needs to start from the CEO, because otherwise you have different departments. Every different department is only looking at this silo. And usually for customer support, this is, how you serve more customers better with less, right? But if the strategy is that we're going to use this to actually drive revenue and to make more money as a company, and to actually keep and increase our retention with existing customers, that's a different conversation, and that needs to be cross-functional. And that's why this customer-centric culture really needs to be set from the top. And if you are in a company where you really are frustrated with the customer support, this is because the CEO, I would say, doesn't care. Because he didn't see this as an opportunity, this to be part of the service and this to be part of the actual product. Because a whole product is not just the buttons into the mobile app or to the web portal where you log in and click stuff. The whole product is also the customer experience and the support that you get around this product.
Yes, and one point we haven't touched on, which is implicit rather than explicit so far, is that if you're prioritizing customer service, then customer service has a status in an organization. So I'm thinking of a fintech, for example, where a few years ago, long before the sort of COVID, they decided to, quote, save money on office space by saying to the customer service people, oh, you can stay at home, you can do your stuff from home, implicitly, you're not important, we're not even going to give you a bloody desk, you just sort of sit there and answer people complaining the entire day, saying, oh, I can't get back into my Revolut card, life's a misery. And it must be very tough doing that kind of job where you only ever get people complaining at you the whole day. I mean, it must be awful being, on one of these sort of telephone banking lines where people just call, or Virgin Media is appalling. Virgin Media is appalling customer service. And they just get people being cross with them all the time. So there must be some status thing here, which is that being customer service in Payhawk, you don't say, oh, you stay at home because you people implicitly aren't very important, or you guys go and sit in the corner because nobody's really interesting. And we'll get the really cool people, the devs in the center.
Yeah, I think on our side, the way we think about it is, we are, within our culture deck that we have in the company, there is a statement saying that if you come to work, regardless of your job function, and all day you wasted by helping a customer, and you couldn't do anything out of your list and you went home, you have done an amazing job at work, right? You have done the right thing, and whether there are other things that needs to be done, I think customer is number one that we need to serve, because this is why we are in business. And I think the other really important part of you touched on an important point where the customer success is really the front and center of all the frustration. There are two important aspects. The first one is to actually empower the organizations to be able to funnel properly this feedback, where the functional leaders, the executives are reading this feedback. And reading feedback is hard, right? You have to really get to a channel where customer success people are feeling comfortable sharing this to the C-level and seeing responses and seeing changes in the organization based on their feedback, because nobody is going to be frustrated if we do a mistake. Everybody is super pissed off for a month or two, and then we do the right thing and we solve it, right? This is going to give the satisfaction of those people that we are actually, this is a journey, right? We are not going to get everything right from the day one. And the second kind of really important aspects when it comes to customer success is that when there is a frustrated customer, or a customer that is pissed off at something, there are emotions. And there is an opportunity to change the sign of the emotions. So the most raving fans, you can turn from the most vocal and unhappy customers if you make them happy. That's why we are training our people on the team that when there is a customer that is extremely frustrated, maybe he's right or he's not, doesn't matter. Customers should be, we regard it as that he has a point if he's frustrated. If you are able to change the sign of his emotions and do an extra effort to show him that we care, then this customer will be a customer for life. And this is the way we think about it and we approach it. And I think this is very important. I mean, the goal is not to get this person off the phone or, just have an ego and say, well, you can go and use the service somewhere else. Use this as an opportunity to transfer this guy into a raving fan. And I think these are part of the learnings you have within the organizations that are extremely important. And actually, this is giving a lot of empowerment internally, also to our sales teams and our engineering teams, that we are, at the end of the day, trying to make customers as happy as possible and as involved as possible in our journey. Because that is the difference between a product company and a service company. Our only revenue is coming from customers that are using our product and referring our products to other people that have had an amazing experience with us. And that's why we believe this is for us a revenue generating function rather than a cost center. And the other thing importantly that you touched is that a lot of companies, because this is regarded as a cost center and their objective is to serve more, better with less, they start looking at, moving, outsourcing this, maybe cutting their desk or maybe moving this overseas. And this usually is not a good strategy. A good strategy for us is to have the customer success sitting 2 desks away from an engineer, right? Regardless of whether these people are on the phone or doing something completely different, you should have the direct connectivity between those people selling and those people building the thing constantly.
Yes, and a number of the points you're touching on there remind me of the prior episode with Richard Arundel, who's the co-founder of Currency Cloud, who, since we recorded it, Currency Cloud have sold themselves to Visa for £700 million, about $1 billion or something like that, which for people who listen to the last show should keep Richard out of Babycham drinking for life. And the point he was making was that culture needs to incorporate these things, and one of the cultural things about Currency Cloud right from the start was that they see themselves as being in partnership with their clients. And B2C and B2B, well, I understand that B2B you're dealing with a company and B2C you're dealing with just a person, but that's a sort of a bit simple and a bit crude. I think that the thing is much more how many customers/clients does a business need? You can imagine that, well, a single person like me, a single consultant, can actually do quite well with one client every year. And that scales up to an Amazon that's got sort of, a trillion clients or something like that. So actually, if you just look to the number of customers a business has, there's a continuous curve. It doesn't suddenly sort of have a huge gap where there's nobody between, let's say, 1,000 clients and 10,000. It's continuous. And along that chain, how much you can partner with your customers will vary. If you're a business that's got 10 customers or 10 clients, you can spend a lot of time with each of them. If you're like Amazon, you've got 1 trillion, you can't spend that time with them. However, as we discussed before, even Amazon has the attitude that they want to help their customers out. It reminds me of something Jordan Peterson said about if you're having an argument with your partner. Being human beings, having emotions, your first emotion is, God, they're completely wrong. I mean, I'm completely right. What on earth is going on? What the hell? So, of course, his advice is to sort of have a timeout and consider the question about how have I contributed towards this situation. It said, of course, your first answer will be not at all. They're a complete bloody idiot or whatever. He said, but just give it a little while and see if anything comes to you. And they said after about half an hour, you'd be amazed at how many ways come to you that actually, well, I did say this. I mean, of course, that's nothing to do with it, but it might have contributed towards this situation being created. And in the same way, I like the way you talk about your learning organisation and how you're upgrading everything as a result of this. I mean, going back to MotoGP, for example, one of the things you want to avoid in MotoGP is the tyre spinning, because it wears out the rubber faster, so you get weaker grip later in the race, and you're also losing acceleration. So there are certain metrics in a company, whether it's MotoGP or whether it's landing on the moon or whether it's being Payhawk, which are literally the rubber on the road. And if you've got the equivalent of your tyres slipping, you can blame the road all you like, but your tyres are slipping. It's maybe the person who just called and complained couldn't find the login button. Okay, well, maybe you could make it bigger. Maybe they're a bloody idiot because it's right in the middle of the page, but you can't say, oh, you're a bloody idiot page. But if lots of people are sort of saying that, oh, maybe we make it bigger, maybe we make it red rather than blue or something like that. So, yes, it's this sort of idea of partnership with a large P or a small p, depending on how many customers you've got, and incorporating that in the culture and seeing the customer service as this, are my tyres spinning on the road? This is the ultimate thing. If your tyres don't spin in MotoGP and your engine's powerful enough, you're going to go quite quickly. If your tyres are spinning, you've got potential which is being wasted. Literally, the engine is doing stuff which doesn't translate into speed.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, we are countering this with increasing the prices. And, as we start to get a lot of customers that we cannot serve, what we are doing is making sure that we are focused on those customers that we are, providing most value, and also we are adding the opportunity to increase the prices, because in life, as you said, everybody knows that something can be cheap and let's say crappy. It can be expensive and it can be crappy, but it cannot be cheap and to be amazing, right? That's why we use that opportunity, and I think a lot of startups are getting to a stage to just get some metrics up there, and then they're in the problem of how do we make money, right? Or how do we, serve more customers? You can quickly go and raise a lot of, let's say, VC capital with vanity metrics in terms of, monthly active users and daily active users and growth on those. But at the end of the day, is that a real business? And where are you going with that? Because our ambitions with Payhawk are massive. We currently have customers from 24 countries that are using, those are businesses from 24 countries that are using the product. And our goal is to be a global provider of company cards and payments, and to really simplify the way financial people manage their company spend globally, so that they can have a central systems where they can control the spend for every employee. They can automatically reconcile all payments and transactions into the company ERP system, and they can have a peace of mind. But they can also provide an amazing experience for their employees who don't have to deal with things like expense report or gathering receipts or gathering paper or filing this paper. They can actually just have an amazing experience and have access to company funds, whether they are spending through a company card or whether they make bank payments. All of that can be decentralized, and these are the companies of the future that we would like to support.
Yes, well, as I mentioned before, I think I'd like to sum this up by saying that the one thing you put over very well is the perspective of being a businessman rather than just a co-founder of a fintech, because fintech is a subset of business, and quite often people forget that. They think it's a superset of tech. Hey, I've got a program that can generate random numbers. Oh, I can sell this somehow, and then you try and work out everything else downstream. Anyway, time's going on a bit, so before I wrap up the show, I'd like to thank all the listeners out there, especially those of you in customer services, and especially those of you perhaps who are motivated to try and do it a little bit better and change the mentality. I'd like to thank my brand partners of the podcast. Smart is transforming pensions and retirement worldwide. Their leading-edge retirement tech platform propelled them to success in the UK. Now they're operating on 4 continents and working with partners like Zurich and JP Morgan. Find out more at www.smart.co. They're listedboard.com, resources to help you start making your board an engine of growth today. And recently I've added a couple of new free board guides, SlideShare PowerPoints on advisory directors and advisory boards and the complex CEO-chairman relationships. If either of those appeal to you, go and download them for free. So, Hristo, we've got quite a good feel for Payhawk. Apparently you like customer service. You've just explained a little bit about what your market is. What are your plans for the next few years, and what would make you an even bigger and better company than you are today if any of the listeners happen to have it or happen to be it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, hiring the right people on the team is quite important to get to the next stage. And definitely our plans are to be a global brand. We really want to challenge the global brands of providing company cards like American Express, Citibank, AirPlus. And we already have the customer base and customers like Luxembourg Airlines using Payhawk to manage all of their spend. And the plans are to go global and to really change the way companies deal with payments.
And in terms of you saying you need more resources, which countries are you in at the moment in terms of teams, developers or customer services people?
So currently we are serving all countries within the European Economic Area and also the UK.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, and I wish you every success in the future.
Thanks for the call.
Thanks for listening. If you're in need of a non-executive or advisory director with deep expertise, experience and contacts in the worlds of both traditional FS and Fintech, or unique insight into how to make your board an engine of growth today, contact me at mike@mikeballiman.com. If you just need one-off advice in these areas via clarity.fm/mikeballiman.
We could sit in a bender all day, watching the firelight dance, watching the firelight dance. We could walk in the mountains before dawn, watching a happy moon ride, watching a happy moon ride. Come away from the city, with the tarmac so dead and the people so sad. Come away from the city, with the faces so grey, with the pain of the everyday. We are wild like the mountains and the trees. Can you see what I mean? Can you see what I mean? We fit in line between the earth and the sky. Kiss the city goodbye, wave the city goodbye, wave the city goodbye, wave the city goodbye. Watch the firelight dance with me, 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 watch the firelight dance.